All right, today we're going to pick back up with the aftermath of the Constitutional Convention. Yesterday we put together, the final copy of the Constitution. Of course, we got to let the states ratify it, and then of course we've got to add a Bill of Rights, and then we can put it into action and go from there. Meanwhile, what we're going to do is we're kind of put this new national government together. Remember, we've got to fill these three branches and give them their powers and see how they execute them. Well, one of the things we're going to run into real quickly is we're going to see a sharp divide. And this sharp divide was apparent at the Constitutional Convention between our Federalist and Anti-Federalist. Once the Constitution is approved, however, federalism is the law of the land. So what we're going to see is the opposing anti-federalists kind of fade away temporarily, but they're going to come roaring back under the representation, as we'll see today, of Thomas Jefferson. One of the first things that George Washington does upon winning the Electoral College is he begins to piece together his cabinet, and that would be in this executive branch here. Washington brings in Alexander Hamilton, Secretary of the Treasury. He brings in Edmund Randolph, the Attorney General. He brings in John Adams by basically default. He came in second as the Vice President. And he brings in Henry Knox as far as Secretary of War. And this guy right here in blue is Thomas Jefferson, the Secretary of State, who most of the time will be outside of the country coordinating business, while George Washington and the rest of his Federalist buddies are running the country. Well, he gave Alexander Hamilton the job of Secretary of the Treasury. And our first term today is Federalist Alexander Hamilton. Here you go. Alexander Hamilton and the Federalists believed that the future of America depended on a national bank, taxation, and a manufacturing economy. A national bank, taxation, and a manufacturing economy. Period. Now, being in charge of the Treasury also meant he had to come up with a plan to raise money. So he's also not only going to create what is called a national bank, but he also wants to continue to collect revenue. One of those is by implementing tariffs. Tariffs are taxes on imports. Taxes on imports encourages Americans to buy American and not from other countries. The third one we just stated is taxation. As we're going to see here shortly, he is going to focus in on one of the highest sales of the time period, and that would be a tax on whiskey, specifically known as an excise tax. Well, as this begins to grow, the Federalist Party needs to make a platform. They need to kind of make a statement of what it is they see as a potential platform for the future. When it comes time to have people pick candidates of who they want to represent them, they've got to have a go-to. Well, my next term would be manufacturing and a national bank. And these are two winning issues when it comes to the Federalist. So here's your definition. Manufacturing and a national bank were beliefs by the Federalist for America's future. They were beliefs by the Federalist for America's future. Now, as we're going to see, this is going to come under sharp criticism by none other than Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson is going to pitch a fit about where does it say in the Constitution that this new government behind me can create a national bank. You see, Jefferson and his fellow advocates and supporters believed in what is called a strict interpretation of the Constitution. They believed it word for word. In other words, that we must not stray from what we just spent all this time creating. Here we are getting ready to adjust and do something that we're not allowed to do. But Hamilton pulled a card on him. He said, wait a minute now. In the Constitution, there is a clause. It is called the Elastic Clause. Think of a rubber band. You can stretch a rubber band. And Hamilton said, it is the national government's job to provide for the general welfare of the American people. We need to coin a common currency. We need to loan money. We need to assume state debt as a national order of having a stable economy. In doing so, we have to stretch the Constitution without breaking it, without snapping that rubber band. We've got to stretch the Constitution and apply it to the current need that is at hand. Jefferson just shook his head and was disgusted. He was disgusted about a lot of things that were happening. In fact, he will quit, and he will leave Washington's cabinet, and he'll go back, and he'll begin to put together a political rivalry party, a party that can compete against the Federalists. Let's go ahead and bring him in. Your next term is Thomas Jefferson, and not the Anti-Federalist, but Thomas Jefferson and the Democratic Republicans. This would be the answer to the Federalist elite, money, power, controlling all. One other thing I haven't mentioned yet is if we look here to the left, we're going to see the appointment of a lot of Federalist judges. Hence, Washington is a Federalist president, and we'll see Adams be a Federalist president, and we're going to see this turn of events in which Federalist judges are also stacking the judicial branch throughout this chapter as well. So there's this fear of a government takeover by these Federalists, and Jefferson is having none of it. So he's put himself together a political party, and what he needs to do next is put together a platform. But before we go there, let's go ahead and get a definition. Thomas Jefferson and the Democratic Republicans believed America's future. They believed America's future was in farming, comma, limited government, comma, and defending states' rights. They believed America's future was in farming, limited government, and defending states' rights. Period. Let's move on down to our next one. Agricultural and states' rights. This was the belief of the Democratic Republicans, and Thomas Jefferson for America's future. For America's future economy, let's say. Yeah. It was the belief of the Democratic Republicans and Thomas Jefferson for America's economic future. Period. All right, let's proceed. We saw George Washington pretty much set all these precedents. He was the first this and the first that, and he got to kind of pave the way for those to come. One of the things he did when it became a challenge in foreign affairs is England and France went to war again, and Washington decided to issue a proclamation of neutrality. We don't want any part of that. If you haven't noticed, America doesn't have a navy, America doesn't have an army. We just are climbing out of the revolution. I don't think so. And he told England no, and he told France no, even though France helped us not that long ago. Now, on the domestic front, there was a rebellion because Hamilton had issued a tax on whiskey. And out in Pennsylvania, that's where those farmers produced large amounts or large gallons of whiskey. And they rose up in rebellion. And Washington jumped on his horse with 11,000 troops and rode out to Pennsylvania. And he put down that rebellion real swiftly. Some of them were even protesting no taxation without representation. And Washington laughed. He said, "Y'all got representation right here from Pennsylvania. You can't say that. That doesn't apply to this situation." But instead of apprehending, arresting, and charging with treason, Washington sent them home. He said, "I'm going to pardon you and pardon you and pardon you. And I'm going to show you what a just government looks like compared to a tyrannical government, because the king would have hung all of you." So that was a success moment for Washington. It's called the Whiskey Rebellion. Here's your definition. The Whiskey Rebellion proved that the executive branch of government, was strong. Period. Washington served 2 terms, and he said, I'm done. Now, nothing said he had to leave after 2 terms, but he wanted to make sure that he didn't set a bad reputation of being a king, that in this country we've got to unleash democracy. We've got to have turnover of leadership. It's healthy for the next generation to pick new leaders who are current in the time period to govern the country. So, he steps down. Of course, at this point, the Electoral College is going to pick a new president. Whoever comes in first will be president. Whoever comes in second will be vice president. I have an idea who wants to be president and who's going to be the challenger, but we'll wait till tomorrow to find that out. As of right now, Washington has a few words of advice. He says, I'm going to give you 3 warnings. And this will be our last definition. It's called Washington's farewell address. Number 1, avoid sectionalism. Avoid this North and South thing. It's going to lead to civil war. Boy, was he right. Number 2, practice isolationism. Practice isolationism. Don't get involved in England's problems. Don't get involved in France's problems. Worry about America's challenges. Before long, we'll be pulled into everyone's problems around the world. Let's focus on us, practicing isolationism. And number 3, boy, did he watch it happen in his own cabinet. He saw political divide. He said, no political parties. Number 3, no political parties. He watched the Federalists and Democratic Republicans kind of begin this process of dividing America and making them pick sides. And boy, we haven't got away from that either. Okay? That'll do it.